They thought silence meant surrender, but silence isn't the same as consent. And even scorched ground holds water if you dig deep enough. This is the Roots Remember, Part 2 of the Sigil Series. In the Covenant crackdowns, the first one banned was at Hex Me Not. She had 2 million followers, a storefront, and a monthly Coven Crate subscription. She lit candles on live streams, named names, and dropped hexes like hashtags. She was lively and loud. Too loud. The algorithm flagged her for promoting harmful ritual behavior. Her account vanished overnight. The second one had nothing to do with the craft, just a therapist. She posted a video titled, "Your anger is sacred, not shameful." Gone. By the 5th ban, the message was clear. The witches went quiet. Comment sections dried up, Pinterest boards locked. Facebook stories vanished. Posts began to shift. Talk of pivots, of ending the moon dances, of trading goth and glitter for gingham. One woman wrote about letting them take the torches and lighting candles inside, though the post was gone within the hour. And somewhere behind a screen, in a quiet garden still clinging to dew, Cassie had been watching, taking it all in, every post, every ban, every whisper tucked between recipe steps. Now it was her turn. She clicked record. The morning sun spilled over her rosemary like honey. She adjusted her phone, propping it up with a chipped mason jar, and gave the screen her best God is good smile. Her blue apron fluttered slightly in the breeze, the one with Proverbs 12:4 stitched across the hem. Her braid was neat, her voice warm. "Good morning, ladies," she chirped, just sweet enough to pass. "Today we're talking about rosemary, one of God's most generous herbs." She bent low, brushing dewy leaves between her fingers. "Rosemary's great for roasting potatoes or seasoning chicken, but it's also a powerful helper for memory. If your littles are having a hard time focusing with homeschool, try tucking a sprig behind their ear before Bible study." She gave a soft laugh, light, harmless, as if that were all there was to say. She didn't mention the bruises, or the ache in her ribs, or the way her wrist still burned from being yanked too hard, and how the back of her arm was still purple where the sleeve didn't quite reach. And she didn't say she used the rosemary on her kids. She used it mostly for remembering her mother, the feel of the dry, brittle stems pressed into her palm, the faint scratch of leaves against her skin, the sharp green scent that clung to her fingers long after. Years ago, her mother had leaned close, her voice low and certain. "If things ever get dark, go to the plants. They'll tell you what to do." But just like Cassie's garden, something else was growing. Spellnet was taking root. The first node had been lit by a tech witch who never gave her real name. They only knew her as the Ethermancer. She'd gone quiet long before the bans, but not before planting the code. Not just in servers, but in its rhythms. She didn't just hack the system, she fed it. Devotionals where every 7th word followed spell structure. Fertility trackers laced with pixelated glyphs. Homemaking blogs that taught women to stir clockwise, tie red ribbons around glass jars, salt the corners of a nursery for freshness. It spread like mycelium, not seen, not spoken, just known. The spellnet wasn't an app, it was a pulse, a presence behind obedient smiles. No logins, no usernames, but the witches felt it deep inside themselves, in recipe steps that didn't quite make sense but felt right, in phones buzzing just before a hard thought rose up, in group chats where no one used the word witch anymore, but everyone understood. Invisible in plain sight, viral without going viral. Posts spoke of how the more obedient they appeared, the stronger the roots became. Others urged watering themselves down, making their personalities disappear to stay safe. All across the country, without banners, without bloodshed, without brooms, the network pulsed, quiet, patient, thirsty. And far from the screens where those words first echoed, Cassie's pie was burning. She smelled the pie burning before she saw it, sweet crust turned acrid, sugar bubbling black. She struggled to hold the tears back. The timer hadn't gone off. Maybe she'd forgotten to set it. Of course she'd meant to, but she couldn't remember doing it. A tear slid down her face and hissed on the hot pie tin. She stood in the kitchen, one hand hovering above the oven handle, the other trembling at her side. Her wrist still hurt, her ribs still ached, and the silence in the house was louder than any shouting had ever been. She reached for her phone, not to call anyone, just out of habit, out of need. She knew if he caught her in this state, the pain would only get worse. The screen lit up with a soft chime, a notification from an app she downloaded months ago. One of those homemaking things, faithful cooking for Christian wives or some such. It was all cinnamon and scripture, smiling women in prairie skirts holding casseroles, except this recipe didn't make sense. Salted marigold preserves, 1 cup salt, 13 marigold petals, 1 red ribbon. Stir clockwise 3 times only. Bury what's bruised. Pray with the soil. The roots remember. Cassie blinked, heart thudding like a slow drumbeat in her ribs. She tapped more info. No blog, no link, just a map. A red dot pulsing in the hills not far from where her grandmother used to live. No directions, no name, just there is a place for you. She dropped the phone and covered her mouth. For a second, she thought she might scream. But what came out was a breath. It was shaky, but whole. Because something out there, something ancient, called to her. Other women were receiving messages too, quiet, cryptic, like something had slipped through the seams of their screens. One girl with bubblegum pink hair and a smile like frosting was recording a lavender sugar scrub tutorial. She had the soft music playing and a Bible verse nestled in the caption like a fig leaf. She hit play to preview it, and the audio changed. No music anymore, just static. Then a voice, soft, layered, like multiple women whispering all at once.
Bind yourself to the covenant. She speaks in the root work. She waits in the soil. Bind yourself to the covenant.
She dropped the phone. It almost fell into the bathwater. She scrambled back with her heart in her throat. The video vanished, replaced with an error screen, unsupported format. But when she looked again, the lavender in the jar had shifted. 3 spirals. A sigil formed in herbs. Then silence. The speaker blinked out. Her phone locked itself. When she unlocked it, the Notes app had a new entry. Roots beneath, eyes above. You are not alone. She didn't write that, but she kept it. All across the country, in kitchens and salons, in boardrooms, gardens, gyms, and bedrooms lit by tea candles, women and men looked at their phones, then at each other. Some told themselves it was a glitch. Some deleted it and then cried for reasons they didn't understand. Some wrote the words on scraps of paper and tucked them into their bras or socks like prayers. The spell net pulsed, a heartbeat in the dirt. But on the surface, in pressed cotton and Sunday shoes, there were new gods to pray to, smiling at submission, calling it grace. But all Cassie saw was how they fed on fear. The church was already hot when she arrived. They'd taken the curtains down.
"Let the light of the Lord shine through,"
Pastor Joel had said. But the air was heavy, like the sanctuary was holding its breath. Cassie sat in her usual spot, 3rd row from the back, hands folded over her skirt like a good wife should. She wasn't looking for trouble. She never was. "Mugwort helps with the bruises," the old woman next to her whispered, not turning her head. "But rosemary helps you remember why you got 'em." Cassie didn't respond. She didn't even flinch. She just stared ahead as Pastor Joel stepped into the pulpit and opened his Bible like he was loading a gun.
"The world is rotting,"
he said.
"and when the harvest is threatened, the gardener must be bold. Pull in the weeds before they choke the crop."
He preached obedience, of masculine authority, of restoring righteous order. He praised the covenant's new mandates: girls to be married young to protect fertility, wives corrected firmly when rebellious, and silence upheld as virtue. Cassie's hands trembled. Her hands were folded still, and her womb was empty. No matter how hard she tried, there would be no child. Just punishment, just pain, and always the blame. Then came the scent, not of incense, but sulfur. 2 men in the corner stood and pulled up a bound woman, barely older than herself, onto the slate floor at the front of the church. She fought them with all her strength, silent and wide-eyed, but they held her fast. The poor woman's own husband approached with a small flame and a cold smile.
"This is what happens to the disobedient,"
Pastor Joel said, never missing a beat in his sermon. There was a rush of heat, and her shadow writhed on the floor. The pastor whispered, "Witch." No one in the congregation screamed, nor did Cassie. The preaching continued louder while what remained of her was taken away, and the floor was hastily washed. The deacon's youngest daughter, not more than 10 years old, was brought to the very same spot to kneel while wearing a gown of blinding white. 3 elders poured water over her head and declared her to be pure and ready to take her place in the covenant's new plan. She sat with her head bowed, shoulders bobbing, silently weeping while she wiped at the soot that had spoiled her spotless dress. That night, Cassie didn't pray. She packed. She had to do this while he was out with the boys. It was her only chance. She got out the salt, marigold, and a single red ribbon. But she couldn't do this. She couldn't drive out into the middle of nowhere on the word of some cryptic app. Her hands shook. She reached to unpack, tried to breathe, and then she smelled it. Smoke. Not from the church, but from the pie she let burn. Without realizing, she rubbed her ribs and felt a sharp pain. And she remembered. Next time, it'd be her. So she zipped the bag and left. She wasn't the only one either. They came from everywhere. Women, men, some with children, some alone. Aprons, headscarves, business suits, motorcycle jackets. No one spoke. They followed the pin, that little red dot that called to a desperate part of them. Through woods, across cornfields, down roads so forgotten the GPS blinked out and stayed blank. Each one carried something: salt, marigold, and a red ribbon. And when one came upon another on the trail, there was no fear, no need for names. They held out a hand, and the other took it. Step by step, hand by hand, the trail thickened. Dozens, then hundreds, then more. Someone started humming, old, low, bone deep, the kind you hum when your great-grandmother's hands are over yours. One by one they picked it up. The hum rolled through the forest like fog, and under their feet, the dirt hummed back. The map hadn't lied, but it hadn't told the whole truth either. There was no building, no fire pit, no circle of stones, just a clearing at the edge of a small, clear river with some soft moss underfoot. There was tall grass brushing at their legs like a lover's hand. The air thick with lavender and pine and something older, something that smelled like memory. It wasn't a wild place. It had been tended, not recently, but long ago, by hands who knew. The trees that grew here were the right ones. The herbs were exactly what they needed. It was a garden, but not the kind made for show. This one was planted to survive. Cassie stepped forward. The wind shifted. The grass leaned in toward her, and under her feet, the soil continued its hum, the river rippling alongside in tune. Behind her, the line of travelers stood still, silent, hands clasped, hearts thudding, breathing in unison. This wasn't the end. The red dot was never a destination. It was a signal to begin. The breaking of the dam. The spell net had gathered enough. The roots had spread deep. The ground had remembered them. And this wasn't meant to be the journey's end. Cassie took a deep breath, and from her and every throat along the water, the words rolled out as one. We are the Coven. Every single tear watered the soil, and it drank deep. So share it, speak it, let the roots spread. And make sure to catch part 3, The Garden Grows, next Monday. Sweet dreams if you can find them. I'll see you here next time on Dead Time Stories HQ.